I understand, some of the traditions and entrenchments and things like in, any industry.
That's a polite way to say it. You're a good CEO.
So good.
You're a really good CEO. Golly, that was solid.
You talk about it privately. We talk about it publicly. This is the Real Estate Insiders Unfiltered Podcast. Welcome again to the Real Estate Insiders Unfiltered Podcast. I'm your sick Dwiggy Dwiggins with the flu, along with my co-host, thankfully in another building,
Yeah,
Mr. Keith Robinson. We had a fantastic guest, somebody I got to know a few months ago when I was on his podcast for his company, RJ Pittman, the CEO of Matterport.
Yeah.
One of the smartest technology people I guarantee you we've ever interviewed.
Yeah, he's sharp.
I mean,
he went to Stanford and Michigan. And then,
is that what it was? Stanford and Michigan. And he worked at
Google, Apple, and eBay. So yeah, I mean, look, what did we talk about? First thing I had to ask him is, well, what'd you learn from being on the teams at Google, Apple, and eBay?
Yeah.
Why he stepped away from, tech giants to go take the helm at Matterport. He shared this concept of digitize the physical world, which I found really interesting.
Cool.
Yeah. Dwiggy drops a get to and a sham wow. So make sure you listen for that, because that's my favorite. That's my favorite James quote of the pod. We had a really thoughtful discussion about how to approach sacred cows and those conversations inside of a company, what VR, and AR could mean for residential real estate, the potential acquisition with CoStar, and his vision for the next 3 to 5 years. We covered territory. You're going to dig it. Put it in your ears, kids.
RJ, welcome to the podcast with my hoarse voice for our viewers and listeners. I'm just getting over the flu. Yay me. This morning
Dwiggy's playing hurt today.
I was playing hurt today. So
RJ, I'm excited.
I mean, this morning was a little rough this morning. So you and I got to hang out in San Francisco a month or two ago, and I'm really excited about having you on the show to cover a lot of fun topics. Before we dive in, would love for you to give a speed round version of your background, because Keith and I looked at your LinkedIn profile, and you have quite the background. Google, Apple, eBay, you've been everywhere, man.
Google, Apple, eBay, you've hit for the tech cycle. Like you just need one more. You'll have all the technology infinity stones. That's pretty cool.
I like that, infinity stones. That's a good one. I gotta weave that into the LinkedIn, I think.
Do it.
So give us a background a little bit on how you got to where you are today. So
sure, happy to. And before the infinity stones, I'd say the first half of my career was doing it the hard way through startups. I started a number of companies, co-founded a few, and the usual battle scars, a few nice wins, and a lot of spectacular, painful fails along the way. And that's actually, sort of what led me to the path of my first, as my mom would have put it, my first real job, where I worked for somebody else other than me in a company that I didn't create. But interestingly, that was Google. And I was working on a search engine company as part of my startup back in the day. So I was deep in the space. They were a partner. And it was sort of the blink of an eye, and half of my company was over at Google. And this was 2007, and it sort of began a new chapter for me after 10 or 15 years in the trenches, working on everything from e-commerce to, we actually built one of the first online brokerages to conduct, I think, one of, if not the first stock trade over the internet. That's a whole nother story, but it goes back. And so these were pretty formative years, mid 90s, early internet days, early web, and then into the boom, a bit later. And I got to the big companies in mid 2000. So 2007, I was at Google, which at the time was really a great big startup. Just under 10,000 people, which is crazy to think that's just 5% of the size that they are today. Just wild, meteoric growth. And what I wanted as an entrepreneur is a front row seat to something at scale. And man, you couldn't beat Google scale. And so I was working on everything in the formative days of image search, news, Google Finance, video search, just as YouTube was a little startup getting going.
Yeah.
And then this now you just, exploded into, quite the platform that it is today, billions of searches a day on the products that I was managing. So I got my money's worth, and
Hmm.
took me through a journey of trying to lead some disruptive innovation on platforms that were pretty established, but really still had a lot to give, right? And so I had an opportunity to join Apple at a special time, was when Steve was still in the driver's seat, and they wanted to do some crazy stuff in e-commerce. I was down for it. It was an incredible period. This was the iPhone era.
Right.
And how do you bring the iPhone? And my first product launch online was iPad 1.0. So
Wow.
before the world
Wow.
saw their tablet,
Yeah.
and quite a ride in its own right, to just be part of these companies during transformative growth when maybe you thought like how much bigger could they really get, right? And
Yeah.
Apple is nowhere near even $1 trillion company, much less I think even 100 billion. So it kind of puts it in perspective. And at eBay, I was just given, a bigger seat at the table, um, where commerce was the entire, business for the
Yeah.
company. And we set out to do something, pretty bold and pretty transformative, which I, absolutely loved. I'll tell you, if there's ever a company, that whether it's your kids or somebody coming up that, where you say, what's a good career path and what are some notable tours of duty? eBay is one of these purpose-driven companies I feel like everybody who's in tech or really in any industry should put a couple of years into.
Hmm.
It's the most
Interesting.
amazing commerce-enabling, opportunity-enabling platform in the
Yeah.
world.
Hmm.
Wow.
And I
Interesting.
never really appreciated it till I was on the inside, and
Right.
looking at all the sellers in 190 countries,
Hmm.
who were given
Yeah.
economic prosperity through this platform that rose through the first era of the dot-com boom and is going stronger today, by the way, than it ever has. Even though we sort of live in this Amazon world, it was
Hmm.
a special company, for sure.
Yeah.
I
How
have
did
a
you get
question.
to? Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
Oh
You
no, go
keep
ahead,
no,
James. No,
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 please.
you.
You always go first. Go. Go.
All
Go.
right.
Go.
Well, I mean, I can't ask someone who has been at Google, Apple, and eBay if there's, I mean, if there's a through line that you observe. Granted, you were at different phases, different roles, you know, different experiences as a leader. But looking back on it, is there a through line to these great companies from a leadership standpoint that you experienced or that you were able to give or to codify into your leadership approach? Like, what did you learn from being at three titans of tech?
Yeah. I mean, so many things. There's books and Netflix miniseries to be had, just out of
Yeah,
my perspective, and maybe one day. But
yeah,
a couple of things. I mean, very different companies, very different cultures. Google was born as the internet, right? Like it
right.
really became the fabric of the internet. And Apple, which arguably is responsible for why and how I got into technology at age 10, way back in the
Right.
day to begin with,
Hmm.
um, added the internet later. And quite frankly, I think is still trying to figure out what its role is in the internet and
Yeah.
cloud and all of this
Yeah.
stuff.
Sure.
Remarkable, in the mid 2000s, that all the apps that the company used were desktop apps, like very few
Right.
things that were web-based apps and web browser things. It took another decade,
Hmm.
for that to happen. But what I would say is, you know, Google was an extraordinary, company, probably, not only once in a generation, probably once in, maybe 50 years, right? 5 decades or so,
Hmm.
because these two young founders were unbounded in their vision. They had
Hmm.
this sort of notorious 300-year vision, but they actually lived and walked the talk of something so outrageous every day. And you could
Right.
see it in these step functions, in meteoric growth over time. And then you go to Apple, and of course, you got Steve and Tim. Tim's the greatest operator, best operating CEO probably ever.
Hmm.
And that, I'm not saying that lightly, but he's the guy that scaled that business to 3 trillion, right, to what it is today. And
Right.
of course,
Hmm.
nobody has the vision that Steve does. But all of these companies had an appetite, to be disruptive, and they had the courage
Hmm.
to disrupt themselves. And I was just looking for that, saying, could I be an entrepreneur in a place where you get to stand on the shoulders of, quite a bit of scale and momentum. The stakes are high, because if you screw it up, you've got a lot at stake. But I suppose in startup, they're do or die as well. But, you're usually 10, 20, 50 people, whatever.
Sure.
A lot more riding on these companies. And I really appreciated the fact that they all gave me long enough rope to hang myself. And but in these different ways, right? But even today, you can look at these companies and they're desperate for innovation. They're desperate for disruption and transformation, even 30, 40 years in now for Apple, for example. And eBay's the same way. No question about it.
Interesting.
So we want to dive into how you got to your role as CEO of Matterport. We do these 2 rapid fires real quick just to give the viewers a little background on you. Keith, why don't you kick us off real fast?
Sure.
So,
I am a pretty voracious reader, so I build my reading list.
It's an understatement.
This is a selfish way that I can build my reading list. So, favorite book or podcast this year ever? Time frame doesn't really matter. Just one that's impacted you a tremendous amount.
Well, I'll tell you what's top of mind for me. I am in. We are in build mode at Matterport. I think we are just so deep in this creative innovation period thing I was just talking about. We just decided this year to go super deep, and so we're building product at the fastest rate we ever have. And so I care a lot about what we're putting out and how we're putting it out and who we're putting it in front of. And so product design is something that's been a hallmark of my career. I'd like to say we're a product-led company at Matterport, product-led CEO. And there is a fantastic book called As Little Design as Possible, all about Dieter Rams, who is, arguably one of the, greatest industrial designers, information designers, thought leaders, of, the last century. And if you don't know Dieter, he's also, was a great inspiration to Johnny Ive, sort of this virtual mentor to inspiring the next generation of design. So if you've seen like in the 50s and 60s and that sort of mid-century era, Rams was out there doing like the Braun shavers, those really cool Braun clocks. He was the, chief designer over there, amongst many things, and had these really cool stereos that would mount flat on the wall and speakers were flat. It was like way ahead of his time, just and has inspired, generations of products. And the book is all about simplicity. It is all about taking complex things and demystifying them, deconstructing them, less but better. And he's got all these design commandments in there that are just extraordinary. And I guess the last thing I'd say that why I go back to books like this and get deep in it is they're timeless, just like his products and things. And
sure.
Today we live in this world where people say, there's different ways we want to make sure we save the planet and that our products are recyclable and things. And Dieter had this great vision, which was make products that you never get rid of. That is the best way to be sustainable. And this was 50 years ago, right? 60 years ago. Like crazy.
Speaking of products you never got rid of.
Grounded in how you can solve all your business problems. I'm telling you, you don't have to be a design company. You don't have to even be deep in tech. You read how this guy, can simplify the most complicated, convoluted things. It translates to every part of business.
So that's RJ, awesome. You said things you don't get rid of over your right shoulder. I'm looking at 2 apples here, one of which you turned on.
Yes, sir.
What is it? What model number is that?
Yeah, so we're coming to you live from the lab here. So this is where you can see it like a warehouse down in the basement.
That's where innovation happens.
And this one is indeed, that is an original 1984 first generation Macintosh. In fact, it's my Macintosh from the day, and it is now fully functioning. I found a restoration company in Chicago. They completely took it apart and rebuilt it, and I have all my original software from the day.
That's just awesome.
And you talk about simplicity. I'm running Mac Paint and Mac Write, these 2 wonderful applications,
which were like way ahead of its time, like back.
And they're so purposeful and useful today. And I was looking on the little floppy, like on the screen, the app is 33K. like a memoji is
33K.
33K.
Yeah.
All right. Like the fact that you can have this much,
That's
innovation in a
awesome.
postage stamp size of code.
That's wild.
Talk about less but better. Like that. That's it, right?
All right.
What's
So
crazy is you probably don't remember what you paid back then, but you could buy one now for $2,500. So talk about something you never want to get rid of. Like it costs the same today as it did probably however many years ago. That's nuts.
Yeah.
So I'm curious how you'll
car or a Mac. You did not. Those did not come easy.
So my last rapid fire, and then we'll get into the main talking points here. I'm curious how you're going to answer this. If you could have lunch with one person, current or historical, who would it be and why?
Boy, man, I'd love to have lunch with so many people. One that strikes a chord with me, another innovator disruptor is Henry Ford. And, he's the guy he's got this famous line. If I had asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses.
Right.
And
Yes.
And what did he give them? Right, he gave them the automobile, and not just an automobile, but like reinvented manufacturing, created the first production line ever for a vehicle that could be mass produced. And you go back and read the stories. I've been back to the factory, which is now a museum, where it all began and where he created the Model T and all of this. And he's got a lab as well, kind of like this, but it was way cooler. And the prototyping and the work that goes on in there was just remarkable. And you got to think about a guy who, first of all, he slept in the office and slept in the factory too. So I see where Elon was going, with his whole electric car push. It was the only way you were going to ever, hit your production velocity, if you did it. And it's so interesting how, the future mirrors the past. And but here's a guy who is literally, you talk about disruption, why it resonates for me. It's very similar to Matterport in that he created a category before it was an industry, right? Before, production cars came out for the every person at an affordable price, it was horses. That's it. And there's a whole interesting story about the ratio of horses to humans in those days, and how the horses just completely disappeared from the United States after his cars started rolling off the line in great volume. And so, like Matterport, I feel like we created a category which we'll get into that didn't exist before us, and we have been trying to forge an industry from it. And man, I'd love to pick Henry's brain and just get a sense of what he was thinking about and how to do it.
Yeah,
it's a good one. Nobody's ever said that, by the way.
No.
So, and we've done 100 and I don't even know how many episodes now. 100,
all right,
4 or 5.
Good.
So he was that was a good one, and certainly an innovator in the space. All right, let's dive in here. I want to bring a couple questions to get. Maybe I do. I don't know. I want to first start with you. You came to Matterport in, if I got this right, December of 2018. And you've had these incredible roles at these other companies, but you came into this new company in a I'm going to call it a new industry. You didn't have any prior real estate, I know the Matterport's not just in real estate, but that's sort of where it kind of got its roots. So where did you start? What was your first objective coming in the door? I'd love to hear your take. You're the new CEO, you're coming in, you're going to shake things up. This is an established company. It's been around a while. What was day one and what was the next 6 months? What did that look like for you?
Yeah. Well, first there's a lot of passion behind why I went to Matterport after eBay. And the super quick story is, alongside my technology career and going back to that first Mac, was also the time that I began, I suppose, my sister or my side hustle, which was design build. When I was a kid who had parents who loved to go in and grab old houses below market price and just go to work and sweat equity into fixing them up, sell them, move to the next house, do the same thing. And my mom led the charge on this. And it led to, as I got older, I never let go of it. And I've done about 20 design build projects alongside tech. I love it. I love marinating and design and build and physical construction. And even at eBay, you'd be surprised to learn that you can actually buy land, you can buy modular homes and all kinds of stuff in the real estate category in the marketplace. And it was during that time that I just felt like, why hasn't technology transformed this industry? We've transformed financial services, retail into e-commerce and fintech and all these other things. And real estate has just been largely offline for, forever. And now, sure, we have a few web portals and things, but that isn't really a complete technology transformation. And what I saw in Matterport was an opportunity to do something, that went way beyond the virtual tour, and maybe into a new way to think about, how real estate is bought and sold in the future. And so I came in and saw a phenomenal product company with the Matterport 3D camera and the breakthrough 3D tours that were true 3D, not just panoramic look around, but a real 3D model of houses that, is pretty breathtaking. And the company sold a lot of cameras. And I said, let's go build a global platform and let's unlock all of the property data, all the property insights that sit inside every physical asset out there when we turn a building into data. And there's much more behind the camera. And, once we get that digital twin of the property captured, that we could unlock. And to me, that's where the big opportunity lied. And so I went very quickly, into a mode that said, let's shift our KPI from how many cameras we sold per day, per month, per quarter, to how many spaces could we go digitize, and how fast could we, get on the schedule of digitizing the built world, where now we're going after how much square feet of the physical world is now digital.
Interesting. And I know you mentioned this to me when we were chatting, but you came in and you've mentioned a number to me, like you guys had a certain amount of customer base and revenue, and then you completely transformed it. What was that transformation? It was just, you said kind of not selling cameras, but moving towards a different path. What did that look like? And give us historical and sort of where it is today, just for context.
Yeah. Matterport had this great reputation of, it was the gold standard of, digital property marketing or the virtual tour, what have you. And it was also, again, perceived as, when you are a gold standard, expensive, complex, and only for the high-end homes, 2 through 5.
You had to buy the camera. And
the camera was $3,500. The cheapest subscription plan for the whole service was $1,000 a year. And I said, look, we have to flip the script on this and democratize 3D capture. Otherwise, we will have a phenomenal boutique business that is always a boutique niche play.
Right.
And so we started right away. I mean, I joined it December 3rd, and January 27th, I was in Times Square, New York City, relaunching the company. And what we did is said, it's no longer going to be shackled to our pro camera at $3,500. You're going to be able to use a off-the-shelf 360 camera for $3,500. And we're going to offer, instead of $1,000 subscription tier, how about $995? Not $995, but $9.95. And that was the beginning. Followed very shortly after that with really getting hardware out of the process entirely, and letting you create a Matterport walkthrough with the smartphone in your pocket, and a free tier, so that literally everybody and anybody who has a smartphone, iPhone or Android, could just download our software and go. And
so I have a question because, and I don't want to say anything that's, I'm not trying to get anybody in trouble or anything like that, right? You're in the lab. It's just us. No one's listening. So when there are these really, I don't want to call it a sacred cow, because that often has a negative connotation, but oftentimes things become a sacred cow because they're so important and so core and fundamental to the future of the business, right? And what I heard you say, not your words, mine, were, there was some things that you had to maybe reframe a little, and for the long-term vision of the company. How do you, for every leader, every person in business struggles with bumping up, whether it's someone on a listing agreement, struggling with getting someone to change the decoration a little bit, all the way up to reshaping a publicly traded company. How do you approach that kind of conversation to help people see, like, I come in peace, and I come to bring good to the environment, but we have to look at this that we maybe haven't looked at in a long time. How do you do that?
It requires, really zooming the camera lens out and being very thoughtful and intentional before you just come in guns a-blazing. And I'll tell you what happened. So I called an all hands before my first day. It was in November. And I went into the headquarters in Matterport. And everybody came in to the big, break room event space we had. And I said, hey, here's the new modus operandi. We're going to go from chasing camera units sold to square footage digitized. And because everybody, what's your vision for the company? What's your leadership style? And that was a full ask me anything. Like, just first of all, be very transparent and vulnerable. And people were jumping up and asking questions like, so, okay, you want to democratize all this? You say the camera's too expensive, but this is 70-80% of our revenue. That could tank the company. And I guess that means, we should all who work on the hardware team should be looking for a job. And I said, well, on the contrary, I'd like to introduce you over here to Lou Marzano, our new head of hardware I just hired, and is going to be starting basically the same day as me. And so everybody's, wait, what? So
what? Right.
Why would he do that? Like, okay, so he must be telling the truth. He must be serious when he says, we're going to walk, talk, and chew gum. We're going to do both. We're going to build what we call our capture ubiquity strategy. There will always be big business for us at the high end. And we're just going to extend how high that high end goes. We can talk about that in a minute, what's now possible with our flagship product that's just gone 10x above that Pro 2 camera that we had back in 2018. And but that was all part of the architecture, and it was all part of the script, and all part of how you bring people along. You got to be able to walk that talk, right, and be able to back it up. And I would just tell people, like, check me next month, and if we're not doing what I said we're going to do, then let's have a conversation about it.
You got to honor what I heard you say is you have to honor the sacred part of the sacred cow as much as
there's no question. There's no question.
And then you
have to own the hard calls. There are sometimes you will be short-term pain for long-term gain, and it is hard for anybody to see it in the moment. Right. And you have to establish and build trust, and the way you do that is through maximum transparency, and again, really being vulnerable and accessible to these people. If you're going to lead them through an inflection point, like a major change to the way we do things, is 100%. The difference between whether you will bring everybody along or you're going to be kind of going it alone and literally rebuilding from scratch.
Right. Great answer. Thank you.
I want to ask a really basic question because it just drives me completely nuts. And Keith knows this one. Why it frustrates the shit out of me that we don't have.
Here we go, kids. Get ready.
No, but like it just really frustrates me that in 2024, almost 2025, that we don't have 3D tours and floor plans on every residential property that's for sale. Like I stare off into the abyss going, what is wrong with our industry? Like, is there a day that's going to happen? Am I just being unrealistic to have an expectation that the second most requested thing now, according to NER's recent study, is floor plans, that we can't actually get that done? Like, what am I missing? I'm talking to a guy who literally has technology that builds
floor plans,
3D tours and floor plans, and it's right. He said $9.95. So I'm just sitting here going, like, do we offer two and a ShamWow? Like, I don't understand. What's it gonna take?
So let's remember, this in 2000, right? Height of the internet boom. The number one way that people discovered and browsed real estate, houses for sale, and eventually, bought one, is through the newspaper, through the classified, no photos, 3 sentences with an address and maybe a price.
I remember.
If you paid the big money, you'd get the little black and white
little box
picture of the outside of the house.
My parents used to do this. Yeah.
In 2000.
2000.
Like,
Huh.
and you can still find some in some of the papers today. Like, pick your town in the U.S. It's there, but it's taken so long, like I said earlier, for technology to disrupt and transform the category. And the reason is there's this, in my opinion, and I'd love to hear yours as well. There's this, longstanding belief with agents. And I don't know if it's a generational thing or people that been in the business too long or whatever, that weren't born digital, where they say the house is going to sell anyway. So I need to put in the least amount of effort and money so that I can get the outcome that, is efficient for me. And that it's remarkable to me that is still there. The other one was that I heard. I went around, and as soon as I got to the company, the other thing I did is talked to a ton of customers out there in front of agents, brokers, buyers, sellers, and these agents would say, well, I especially like going to the ones that were skeptical. I'm like, why are you skeptical? This is like a game changer, and anyone can do it. And they'd say, well, if I put a digital twin or a virtual tour on, my listing, then nobody's going to come to my open house. And that's where I meet them. We exchange business cards. If they don't like this house, I got 3 more down the street. I lose my chance to network, and you are going to disintermediate me. Right. And so I say,
Yeah.
Or the opposite might happen, where I'm going to basically for free be advertising your property to a much, much bigger audience, where you might get 3,000 people to come visit that property virtually. And that translates to maybe 50 people more than you would have ever seen coming through the front door of the actual house. And it literally would take like proof points where, okay, you take the skeptics and you give it to them for free and say, let's do a couple together, no risk, no cost to you. And let's see if you have a drop off in people who come in, and let's see if your house, maybe sells faster and for a higher price. Unfortunately, that doesn't scale, right? I can't, go door to door to millions of properties, but this is really what we're overcoming, is still some of this mentality that what's the least amount of effort I can do to get this house sold for the best price.
Well, that's
what they don't realize is that the Matterport, you see our campaigns right now, which, add life to every listing. And it's all the agents running open houses and answering questions about the size of the media room while they're asleep, because the Matterport tour is more than just a virtual tour. It's all of this data and property insights now that lets prospective buyers ask a million questions while the agent's off, building relationships or catching up on their sleep. And so I think we're there with what they need that answers that question. We're also there with, by the way, you come to Matterport now, you get photos, floor plan, virtual tour, video for your social platform for less than the price than you pay for photos today, right? And I'm not here to pitch my company or talk about it. But
no, for sure.
It's
free childcare and home, and we're throwing everything possible.
A chicken in every pot.
I mean, it's
to do their job.
Now, now you're actually spending more money. If you're doing it the old way and just going and hiring your local photographer who's got a cartel cornering the market on just basic photography, well, now it's cheaper to get all of the things that you haven't had before to make your listing stand out, right? So we've got to connect the dots on this. I feel like, we're at the doorstep of, this transformation.
Yeah. I want to take a question here that we got 3 questions we want to ask before that we wrap up today. I'm going to take these a little out of order from what I had, because I think it just fits a little bit more. So you and I had a brief discussion, and I hope I'm not spilling any beans here. I'm not supposed to, but we'll edit if need be. Your vision for augmented reality. I've seen this video go around where it's, Apple Vision Pro or whatever Meta's thing is, and the ability to tour a property, and like as you're looking, it's interactive, and it can tell you that couch is actually something you get at Crate and Barrel for X number of dollars, and like Am I nuts? Is that where we're headed? Is that a vision that you think we're moving towards, where this sort of augmented reality becomes? What's the name of the movie, Keith, with Tom Cruise, where it was
Minority Report.
Minority Report,
where we're just like, I'm being a little facetious, but the idea of being able to see like everything all immersive, is that reality? Are we moving towards that with your product in the future?
We are, and I'd say, the first half of it, we're there today. So not on the AR side, the augmented reality, but on the VR side, every Matterport, 3D space is VR enabled now. So whether you're dropping a Meta Oculus headset on, or Vision Pro is finally, it's very early days for Vision Pro. We're working with both of these companies we have for years. I worked at one, and so we're quite, we got great partnerships. But and the thing that I will say is that's really cool, starting just in VR today, because the tech, has gotten so good in VR. You drop the headset on and look at any given Matterport tour, it is unreal. Like, I do it with my kids all the time, and it's hilarious because they will just start walking into walls and stuff because they forget that they're actually not in the space. It's very much, it's all proportioned into scale and stuff. And because our models are dimensionally accurate, it forms, the reality for you as if you were there. Now, with all of this new stuff, we loaded, Matterport with all this AI. We have the dimensions of everything. We know how many light fixtures, clawfoot tubs, we could tell you how many burners are on the stove right now today. And you can we can give you all of those insights without a headset. But imagine if you were in the property and you wanted to drop it on and you had a see-through view, and it was like Minority Report, or whatever you're looking at just lights up with more information. That's just a user interface enhancement for us that, is essentially waiting for an audience. Like when we have critical mass, or there are agents that are ahead of the curve and want to provide that on, the property itself, great. And for those that don't, you can go virtual. I could view an apartment in Paris or London from my house with the headset on, or, just a web browser. And we are there. Like, we are there today. We just need forward-looking agents and a forward-looking, ecosystem. The buyers are starting to expect this now, right? You look at Gen Z, millennials, et cetera, $10 trillion spend. They have the biggest generational spend power, way beyond baby boomers. And they are all born digital and prefer, if not expect, that a large part of their biggest transaction they'll do in their lives, which is real estate, be predominantly, if not entirely, digital.
Yeah.
So I hear you, and podcasts aren't interesting if there's not a little debate, right?
Of course.
So I'll take the other side, which would go something like this. Not that I even agree with it, but just for fun. I mean, look, Pokemon Go launched in 2016, and I've been hearing about this augmented reality of residential real estate since people were running into light poles trying to find Pokemons, right? So like, why in the hell hasn't it, like, that was a long time ago. I forgot about that,
by the way.
Right. So like, why hasn't it taken off, or why will it be different? Is it just that the hardware is finally catching up, or what's the real inflection point there?
Yeah, I think it's a few things, but the biggest one is people don't want to put the big honking headset on. And the value you get for, this inconvenience, it doesn't measure up to the inconvenience. Like, we're still at a pretty big disparity. And sure, there's like, Meta and Snap have their glasses now, everything, partnerships with Ray-Ban and whatnot. Like, it's starting to get a little bit better, but I think, there needs to be a kind of a leap in differentiated capability that's like, hey, I'm here with my smartphone, and I'm in a property, or I'm not, and I can get all of that information and all that value without having to, adopt an unnatural, user experience. So that's always been the hurdle for those guys. And so our strategy was, hey, we're not going to go build headsets, or we're not going to bet the company on it, but we'll be compatible, and if
someone will figure it out,
get it over the hump, and there's some mass market adoption, like, the product's going to, be there for that audience to consume.
Yeah. So we got to figure out the hardware, or some new piece of hardware that doesn't even exist yet. That sort of, right. I remember
smaller, faster, cheaper. Like, it's got to get to be invisible. Again, a little Dieter Rams, for you there, where the best design is so good that you don't even notice it. And right now,
that's right.
It's lenses. Like you're running into walls because it's like a football helmet. Like,
Right.
It's so funny whenever I see somebody wearing one of those things. I look at it and you got the handles and like the thing, and I'm going, this is stupid right now. Like no one's gonna actually wear this thing. It's cool, but like
the best comp I have for that though is because I remember downloading a photo on AOL where it took overnight. Right.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking this is really stupid. Right. And now we're streaming, hundreds and hundreds of channels and movies. We'll get there. Yeah. That's my point. So there was an announcement, I don't know, not that long ago, that there was a little deal between Matterport and CoStar. Are you allowed to talk about that? I know it's not final, but with what you're allowed to talk about, can you share some thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure. We're it's not final, but we're expecting to close the end of this year, very beginning of next, somewhere in that realm. And CoStar has been a long time phenomenal partner and customer of ours, customer for more than a decade now. So they've been there since the beginning and kind of bought into
The vision,
the power of the digital twin and spatial data, property insights, all that. And of course, the great virtual tour. And they've used it across their businesses, for some time.
Sure.
And what we essentially got to after just years of continuing to finish each other's sentences, and violent agreement about this view of what it takes to digitize the built world. They have a very complementary, interpretation of that vision, but exactly the same vision. I mean, literally word for word. And so we started thinking, is there a 1 + 1 = 5 here or not?
right.
And a lot of these things you can do just as partners, which we did. We accomplished a lot and covered a lot of ground in 10 years. And, I love the fact that Andy is so pro innovation, let's create a market here. Let's create an ecosystem that gives chance to move the entire industry forward. We need it, right? It's the thing we were just talking about. Like, why isn't all this stuff happening faster? How is it that there's not a tour on every listing, and not just for home sales, but also Airbnbs, hotels, nightly routes, like whatever it is, commercial, office space. We want to just get it to be a standard. And this market is so big, 340 trillion dollar asset class, the entire built world. Like, there's room for 100 Matterports. And you need more than one if we're going to, get the ground game going in any meaningful proportion. And, CoStar's got some wherewithal. And, again, with that complementary vision, it said, hey, this might be the ignition that the industry needs, to just leapfrog into the digital age once and for all.
Well, it's also, you're getting that rich media. And I mean, it makes perfect sense. Obviously, apartments.com, CoStar on the commercial side, and then homes.com on the residential. I mean, it's a natural fit.
It's a great fit.
Just the last couple questions here, just because we're running out of time, but I really want to get your take on this. I'm totally out of left field, but what is your take on the industry recently? You've been in the space for a bit, but obviously in, sort of residential real estate, somewhat newer. But I mean, in the past 12 to 24 months, what are your thoughts? And then as a follow-up on that, where do you think we'll be in 3 to 5 years? So like kind of your sort of outside inside perspective of it.
Yeah. I mean, I think we've covered some of the, the throes of this and I think just the struggles for the industry to run towards something. And again, I understand, some of the traditions and entrenchments and things like in, any industry. They're going to be there.
That's a polite way to say it. You're a good CEO.
So good.
You're a really good CEO. That. Golly, that was solid.
Smooth.
That was really good.
Entrenchments.
But look, one thing I'll say is I'm just going through this right now. And with a property in the family that's, been going through a sale in Detroit. And it was a tough one for me because what I keep observing in the industry is I feel like the seller agents and the buyer agents are still too intertwined, especially in local markets, where you're trying to get a house sold. And it seems to me like the overarching goal still has been sell the house, at whatever, effort it takes at independent of price, right? I don't yet see efficient markets, right? And either that's,
Mm-hmm.
again, some of this entrenchment, there are things, I
Yeah.
think some of the rulings that have come down make a lot of sense to try to disconnect a little bit of this, tightly coupled, like, let's not create the conditions for collusion between buyers and sellers. So, okay, I'm
Right.
good with separating that a little bit.
Sure.
For sure.
By the way, you're in friendly territory here on that.
Yeah, don't
OJ.
worry.
Don't stress.
Yeah.
So
All right, good.
Keith and I have been very, very, very vocal
Where
about
I think,
decoupling.
not that I'm trying to answer the question you asked him, James, but and I think this is in alignment with what you say. So, but correct me if I'm wrong. Is I think real estate is struggling because it historically and for a very long time has moved at the speed of paper, and it is slowly now really experiencing the friction of moving as an industry into moving at the speed of digital. And that transition from speed of paper, sort of folksy, shake hands at the marketing meeting, I got a buyer, you got a listing, right? That's the speed of paper. And there's parts about that are really beautiful and elegant, and I hope that the industry doesn't lose. But we also have to pull ourselves into the speed of digital.
Yeah.
And I feel like those two things, we're in that journey right now, that hero journey of figuring out as an industry our way between those two things.
Mm-hmm.
Without a doubt. And where is it in 3 to 5 years? It will be interesting. I think we are making some strides, right, in towards efficiency. But I still think that there's this great big thing out there called MLS that is incongruent with the network effects that the internet has introduced to us. That by its very existence, is a major governor or limiter on the rate of innovation and the rate of embracing, new technologies, because everybody is programmed to go into this, sort of centralized model, if not sort of gatekeeper, that's woefully behind the technology curve.
Yeah.
That could be a much longer conversation. We will have to have.
We'll have to have you back.
Yeah, we'll have to have you back to go through that one. That'd be
Happy
really,
to get on that one,
interesting comment.
Yeah.
We could have a pretty interesting debate, or not debate, but conversation on that. So,
Well,
all right,
debates
we
are
don't
fun
have
too.
a lot of time left.
Yeah,
so
this
Keith, wrap
is
us up on the final.
Yep, this is a question I always close with. We like to take it back to not losing sight of what it's like to sit in a dining room, conference room, living room with a client. So, if you were an agent or a brokerage, what's the one thing you would implement other than Matterport in your business today to help prepare you for 2025?
And I assume I can't say put Matterport in your business. So
You can. Yes, you can say that. You did, and then give us one more. But I agree with you. Put some damn floor plans on the internet, people.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Get them for free from Matterport. Look, I think we're not just at a virtual digital era, but it's obvious that we're also in a I think the biggest transformation we haven't talked about is artificial intelligence, right? And the inflection point of this data science is so important. Data is the competitive advantage. It always has been. It's the reason I came to Matterport, because we have such an interesting spatial data library. We're almost at 50 billion square feet of space digitized now, since I shift the strategy from selling cameras to let's go get data. We're getting billions of square feet per quarter, guys. Like it's where, and then from that data, you can tap in and create property intelligence, real estate agent intelligence, buyer seller intelligence. And this is a time to run towards this, understand it. Why? Because it's the best investment you can make. The buyers, the sellers are getting smarter. You want to be better than the competition. This is how you do it, right? This stuff is now being brought to your doorstep to make everybody a top agent, a top performing agent. You can get all those tools and all those advantages, literally put, into your inbox, in your Gmail or whatever. And we're certainly, we see the opportunity, but again, this goes way beyond us. This is an extraordinary time to be alive, quite frankly. And we can put just a couple of these pieces together, connect a couple of these dots in real estate. Oh, it gets super interesting, super fast.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's going to be an exciting time for sure. We were on a pod, and we'll wrap up here, where the guest said that there's $1 trillion that was spent into AI
in the last 12 months.
I was like,
I believe
what?
it.
So
yeah.
RJ, thank you so much, my friend,
Yeah.
for being here. Super awesome to chat with you. We definitely want to have you back on. We'll talk about the MLS. That'd be a fun one. Keith and I try to get our podcast canceled about once every month. So
we do. We try to do one episode that has a decent probability of getting us canceled.
Keep it real, right? That's what people want.
Yeah.
That's true.
What a
True
fun
story.
chat, guys. Really appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Appreciate
RJ.
it. We'll talk to you soon.
All right.
Thanks for joining us on the podcast. Hit that subscribe button. Trust us, it's the best thing any of us will accomplish today.